also, in terms of the panel discussion, to allow for each and every one of us in the room and online to contribute. The theme of this discussion is also quite important given the COVID-19 pandemic, which has left many countries in Africa reeling from the impact. Since we got the impact, ILO has come to an estimate that we have had over 230 new social protection interventions in response to the COVID impact introduced in several countries across the continent. The question then is, or the questions are, what has been the impact of these 230 plus interventions? What lessons can we learn and replicate? What has worked? What has not worked? Some of these interventions were introduced as short-term measures. Are we going to be able to sustain them and keep the same level of funding? So the conversation we are going to have in the next hour is to address these questions. And for that, we have a distinguished set of panelists who will shed light on the measures that has been taken in several countries across the region. The session will be in 4 parts. The first part will be an opening that will be led by OSA, Economic Commission for Africa, and the ILO. The second part would then be a ministerial dialogue that will then take place with the ministers present and some who are online. The third part of the session would then be a moderated discussion between the ministers and us as participants. Then, in terms of the way forward, we'll bring the ILO and OSA to then conclude the session. So with that, we have 3 speakers for the opening session. And I would like now to introduce the first speaker for the opening session. Once the opening session is done, I'll then invite the ministers to the panel table. So the first speaker is Ms. Christina Dotter, who is the UN Under-Secretary General and Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General on Africa. She joined OSA in August 2020 and is the Strategic Advisor of the Secretary General on African Affairs. Ms. Dotter is also the focal point in UN headquarters for relations between UDA and NEPAD, as well as the Africa Group with regards to Africa's development. I would like to invite her as head of OSA to give your opening remarks. Over to you, Ms. Christina.
Good afternoon from New York. Good afternoon, moderator. It's a pleasure to be here. My dear sister, Cynthia, thank you again for inviting me also. So let me jump to my remarks because you are late. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It is an honor to participate in this ministerial dialogue, and in this regard, allow me to thank the International Labour Organization for its partnership with OSA, of which this panel discussion is an example, as well as to all participants for being today with us. I will touch very quickly in 3 aspects. First, the need to move from backward designed social policies to forward-looking human capital policies, 2 different animals. Second, what is the game changer in this matter? To populate societies with owners of assets. Third, social protection financing. Domestic resource mobilization should rise. The first one, the world is in crisis. COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine are impacting on the living conditions of the populations worldwide and are increasing poverty and food insecurity across the continent. Against this background, social protection policies are a must. We need to change the policy making mindset from backward designed social policies to forward-looking human capital policies, so that we can move from a assistant charity approach to a clear recognition that human capital policies should be designed to generate social, economic, and cultural returns. Backward designed social policies do not deliver resilience. And resilience is fundamental to ensure that development gains are not lost when external shocks impact our economy. In order to achieve economic resilience that feeds into social resilience, we need to put human capital at the center of economic policy making. As important as fiscal incentive, it is a well-structured contributory and non-contributory system. I would say even more. The contribution rate to macroeconomic stability from strong social protection systems is much higher than the contribution rate of fiscal incentives. If we compare with subsidies, the difference is even huge. Acknowledge that human capital investments have become the variable in the economic growth equation. It's crucial to redesign recovery policy. Africa cannot afford another 50 years without leveraging its most valuable resources. It's human capital. 600 million without electricity, 480 million below poverty line. In many countries, over 90% of children do not reach basic skill levels. This reality tends to cause sometimes a charity reaction from policymakers. But no, this is essentially loss of social value, loss of economic value, and more important, loss of culture value. Yes, culture value. To spend a life below poverty line, in a silent way, we lose our soul. This requires a new conceptual approach that understands that the goal of social protection policies should not be poverty management, but the generation of sustainable development. Two different perspectives. Focus our efforts on laying the foundations of sustainable development is the only way to achieve poverty reduction and resilience. Adopting poverty management policies might bear fruits in the short term, but as the COVID-19 has demonstrated, poverty management does not generate the necessary resilience to ensure that external shocks will not revert hard-won gains. Second issue, the game changer. To populate societies with asset owners and economic growth will just flourish. It entails understanding that social protection policies are the low-hanging fruit in the macroeconomic dashboard to recover better. Why? Recovery will not happen without income distribution. They are a critical tool to promote income distribution. And income distribution is the driver of sustainability. Economic growth without income distribution does not create resilience nor sustainable development. Furthermore, it increases inequalities and poses a threat to social cohesion, peace, and stability. Third, if we agree with 1 and 2, then when discussing how to finance social protection, I believe that we all agree that social protection needs to be underpinned by domestic resources. External financing is not predictable enough for such critical policies, and ODA as a charity assistance approach. As the COVID-19 pandemic has proven, the moment that an external shock impacts worldwide, every country will look after themselves first. External financing is therefore not going to be there when we'll need it more. Hence, the need to ensure that essential policies that are critical to ensure our resilience are funded through national budgets. Allow me to provide the example of the 2008 crisis and the measures that I promote as Minister of Finance when the global financial crisis hit Cabo Verde. We adopt target measures for the most disadvantaged groups. We increased the minimum social pension by 285%. We expanded and consolidate the non-contributory social security system by 100%. We universalized the contributory social security system from civil servants and their families to small traders, farmers, domestic and housekeeper workers, and more. When in 2010, the World Food Programme decided to withdraw from school feeding in Cabo Verde, we kept the food program in the national budget, financed with domestic resources, making the school feeding a program or a critical one to deliver the MDGs. And most important, we did it all with domestic resources. Excellencies, does Africa have domestic resources to finance its socioeconomic policies? This is the question. Most African countries, particularly those engaged in commodity exports, have the fundamentals to run positive primary balance on a consistent basis. The reality, however, has been the opposite. Persistent negative primary balance over time are an indication of lack of control over economic flows, and consequently, they signal the existence of channels through which domestic savings outflow the country, instead of financing national development. Africa loses an average of 88 billion annual to illicit financial flows, 3.7 of continent's GDP. And this is the tip of the iceberg. We need to focus on these issues that constitute the root causes of our financial dependence. In addition, we also need to increase the efficiency of public spending. Allow me to provide you some very important figures. Inefficiency of public spending in education, infrastructure, and health represent a combined annual loss of 2.8 of Africa's GDP. 2.8. So together, illicit financial flows and inefficiency in public spending generates or amounts approximately $150 billion annually. This is the reason why I would say that the key to effective social protection policies in Africa starts with well-structured tax and budget planning and monitoring systems that leverage ICT, finance efficiencies, and prevent outflows. These are the tools for the financial empowerment of Africa. Excellencies, dear colleagues, I would like to assure you that the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa is ready to support you in partnership with ILO, ECA, UNCTAD, and other key stakeholders to make this a reality and ensure the long-term sustainability of forward-looking social protection policies. I thank you. Back to you, my dear sister, Cynthia.
Thank you very much, and a round of applause for And I think the key issues, the issues around being a game changer, change in policy mindset, and also the comments around domestic resources as a sustainable way to address social protection amongst the many other issues. I would like now to invite again online, Madam Cynthia Samuel Olyny, the ILO Assistant Director General and Regional Director for Africa. Cynthia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Again, apologies for starting late. This is largely due to some of the logistic issues in Dakar. It seems there's an echo. I don't know where that's coming from, but can you hear me clearly? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. Let me start by thanking my sister, the USG and Special Advisor on Africa, Christina Duarte. Thank you very much for this collaboration and for the very excellent intervention you've already made concerning this very important issue. Honorable ministers, distinguished colleagues, all protocols observed. It is indeed with great pleasure that the ILO is organizing jointly with the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa this side event on financing social protection and accelerating coverage in times of crisis and beyond, options for a human-centered recovery. Every word in that topic is very crucial. And some of this have already been addressed by the USG. Due to its very positive social and economic impacts, social protection is at the forefront of the development agenda. and it goes beyond poverty alleviation, as the USG has said. It's a key factor in terms of the development of the economic wealth of any country. It's very, very important when we're talking about inclusion and reducing the levels of inequalities that we see growing in many countries, particularly in Africa. But beyond that, it ensures that people enjoy income security and have effective access to health and other services, and are empowered to take advantage of economic opportunities. By raising household incomes and labor productivity, social protection plays a key role, and I emphasize that along the lines that were already mentioned by the USG. Social protection plays a key role in boosting domestic demand, supporting the structural transformation of national economies, promoting decent work, and, as I said earlier, fostering inclusive and sustainable growth. Historically, major crises have provided expansions in financing social protection actions in ways that were considered previously unimaginable. And these are usually led by national finance systems and supported at the global level. The results of these expansions demonstrate the economic growth and wealth creation power of social protection, with strong multiplier effects across various sectors. The low social protection coverage in Africa, which is 17.1%, 17.4%, compared with the global average of 46.9%, is associated with the low spending on social protection. 3.8% of gross domestic product is spent in Africa, compared to the global average of 12.9%. According to the recent ILO estimates on financing gaps in social protection, countries in Africa would need to progressively increase their investments to an additional 8.2% of their GDP to achieve the social protection floor. This means that they need to aim at doubling their current investment in social protection. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, honorable ministers, the ILO Social Protection Floor Recommendation number 202 provides the guiding principles that can help in building universal social protection systems that are financially sustainable, that provide adequate protection to all, and are based on redistribution and solidarity. Not only is a combination of contributory and non-contributory schemes and programs necessary to extend coverage to a heterogeneous population, equally, a mix of sources of financing is needed to successfully address this challenge, including both social security contributions and general taxation. The example from Cabo Verde that was shared with us by my sister when she was Minister of Finance is quite revealing and shows that, yes, it can be done. Algeria has also successfully extended coverage to self-employed workers through innovative mix of interventions from the Ministries of Foreign Affairs of Finance in the country. The COVID-19 pandemic has compelled governments to introduce at short notice temporary measures to extend social protection to uncovered populations and reinforce existing systems. Almost all African countries, and the moderator alluded to this at the beginning, almost all African countries introduced social protection measures, a total of 238 measures across the continent to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic. This impressive deployment of social protection measures and budget allocations demonstrates the capacity of governments, one, to mobilize domestic resources for social protection. However, as the crisis continues, many questions arise regarding the sustainability of these COVID-19 response measures and how lessons from those measures can be used to inform the development of comprehensive and sustainable social protection systems for all. Furthermore, the medium and long-term impact of the pandemic and the current war in Ukraine on the economy and public finances remain uncertain. Economic recession and reduced public revenues may lead to austerity measures, including with regard to social protection, that could put at risk the objective of a human-centered recovery and the achievement of the SDGs. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the low social protection coverage in Africa is not acceptable, and it is not justifiable. Recent development provides us with strong opportunities and global rallying points to accelerate social protection and leave no one behind. The resolution that was adopted by the International Labour Conference in June 2021, as well as the Global Accelerator for Jobs and Social Protection by the UN Secretary General in September 2021, are key drivers that we can build on. Considering the political, social, and economic imperative for accelerating the extension of social protection in Africa, the ILO in Africa, in collaboration with the with the Deputy Secretary General of the UN, in partnership also with OSA and the African Union, launched the Africa Regional Social Protection Strategy in November 2021. And the focus of this strategy is to double in less than 4 years the coverage of social protection in Africa from 17% to 40%. Is this ambitious? Yes, ministers, this is ambitious when we see where we're coming from. Is this ambitious? No, it's not necessarily ambitious when we see what needs to be done. Can it be done? Absolutely. And we're depending on the ministers of finance and all other stakeholders to ensure that we make the needle move from where it is to where it should be. This is not business as usual, and it will require a whole of government approach to ensure that social protection policy priorities coincide with the financing priorities. As was indicated by USG Duarte, there are many avenues to mobilize more resources for social protection. And I'm sure that our ministers will share with us very innovative and homegrown solutions that we can leverage to ensure that this transformation that is required takes place. Let me at this juncture emphasize the importance of this conversation and the feedback that we'll be getting from the ministers of finance, and to thank the ministers of finance for engaging in this very, very important and strategic conversation. It is important that we all commit to making the most of this once in a lifetime opportunity to really address in a fundamental way, in a strategic way, in a sustainable way, the social protection agenda for Africa, building on the good work and the space that was created by the COVID pandemic in emphasizing the importance of social protection, not for poverty alleviation alone, as was indicated by the USG, but for wealth creation. I have no doubt that as we do this, we will work to build forward and achieve the vision of the Africa that we want. I totally believe that together we can make this happen. Thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, Alexia.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, and a round of applause for that. Low social protection coverage in Africa, and we need to move from 17 to 46%. Is it doable? That's the question. 3.8% of GDP for Africa compared to the world's 12% allocation on social protection. What can we do to increase the coverage? This is part of the discussion we are going to have. We still have the final speaker for the opening session, but in order for us to have a smooth transition from the opening to the ministerial discussion, I would now like to invite the ministers to take their seats. And I will start with the Minister for Egypt, His Excellency, Mr. Mohamed Maid. If you could please take your seat at the table. I would also like to invite the Minister of Finance for Guinea-Bissau, His Excellency João Fadia, please to take your seat. And I would like to invite the Minister of Finance, Minister of State Planning, Uganda, His Excellency Mr. Amos Lugolobi, if you could please take your seat. And finally, for those who are present here, I would like to invite the Deputy Secretary General for ITUC, Mr. Eric Manzi, to come and take your seat. And we have two other panelists who are online, Mr. Abebe Selassie, the Director of IMF Africa Department, as well as Your Excellency Ms. Brunson, who is the Deputy Minister of Finance and Budget for Liberia, who are joining us online. Now, for the last statement for the opening ceremony, I would now like to invite the Deputy Executive Secretary for ECA, Ms. Ann Mosi, to also take a seat and deliver your opening remarks. Over to you.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished guests and participants, all protocol observed. It's a delight to be here with you today to talk about this very important topic. Let me start by saying that 7 years ago, we had the ambition for the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, to have it as a resounding global commitment with the ambition for no one to be left behind. And today, this is becoming even more vital than ever, with all the challenges that we have been going through, with the impact of the pandemic, with the impact of the war in Ukraine, and how this is affecting really the most vulnerable, and wiping decades of progress and gains, hard-won gains that the continent had achieved in terms of reducing extreme poverty. So the topic that we're discussing today couldn't be more timely. And indeed, yesterday we had the launch of the ECA economic report on Africa, which actually was tackling this issue and showed that the pandemic actually pushed 55 million Africans as new poor. So basically, it shows that not only we are dealing with those that are below the poverty line, there are those that are highly vulnerable in moving in and out of poverty, and hence the need to really strengthen the social safety nets for the continent to mitigate all these impacts. That's why really what we're talking about here will be key, and it links very well with the theme of the ministerial conference that we're holding this year, which is financing Africa's recovery, breaking new ground. So I think here we need to really talk about breaking new grounds on financing social protection. And let me share a few ideas here. First, starting with the issue that financing social protection really requires creating the space and balancing very tough policy choices that the governments in Africa have to deal with. And in this area, of course, all what we have seen with the pandemic and with the war in Ukraine, the policy space in Africa has continued to erode. We have seen fiscal deficits increasing, debt levels increasing, and hence there is a need to really create that space. And part of the things that ECA has been calling for example, included the debt service suspension initiative, which we had advocated for and continue to call for extending it for another 2 to 3 years. There are also other issues, including also issue of reforming the G20 common framework to help countries deal with the rising debt burdens, and also the issue to really give the poorest countries debt relief so that they can actually have the resources to tackle these challenges. But at the same time, there is a need within the continent to enhance the domestic resource mobilization to create that fiscal space domestically to be able to tackle these issues and address also have progressive taxing policies that can help addressing the inequalities while also enhancing the social safety nets. So that would be really key. Perhaps this is, I'm sure these are among the things that we will be also discussing today. The second issue is perhaps just highlighting how the pandemic showed that countries managed to prioritize what really matters. So we've seen actually African countries placing high priority on enhancing social safety nets. We've seen fiscal spending on social safety nets doubling during the pandemic and reaching to 3.3% of GDP. This is the type of policy choice that we'd like to see maintained going forward, really prioritizing what matters in terms of having a human-centric approach to policy making, making sure no one is left behind. So it would be very important to really preserve the gains that have been made so far on this issue. And I think I'm really looking forward. I'm very excited that we have all this fantastic panel of ministers around the continent to really have this like peer-to-peer learning of the experiences and things that can be actually taken, lessons learned and applied in other countries. I'm sure with, for example, for His Excellency Minister of Finance in Egypt, there's also the Karama and Takaful experience that I'm sure he can shed light on. But also let me mention also the example of Rwanda, where Rwanda actually extended health insurance to the entire population with a cost of 1% of GDP. At the same time, that reduced the out-of-pocket spending to 14%, which is well below the average for Africa and that globally. So I think when we're talking about social safety nets, and with what we've seen in the pandemic, it's really critical to put high on the agenda the issue of health and health social safety nets. So that will be critical to protect the most vulnerable and to reduce the high cost out-of-pocket expenditure that many of the poor in Africa have to deal with. The third element that I'd like to perhaps shed light on is the issue of expanding the contributory schemes to generate resources to finance social protection. So that's part of the issue of creating that space to do more of these social safety nets, having it on a contributory basis. Currently, 74% of social protection are non-contributory. So by actually doing more to increase that share, that also will help the sustainability of keeping these social safety nets and better targeting. The fourth element really is, and I think this cuts across the board, not just in social safety net, but in everything that we're doing. Given the limited resources, we have to get better returns for everything that we are spending. So here comes the issue of raising efficiency. So really raising the efficiency of how these social safety nets are being spent, targeting it better, and also using innovative ways to enhance that. And I think there are many examples within the continent. I'm sure we'll hear about them more today, where we have used, for example, just digitalization to help improve the efficiency and the targeting. And finally, I just want to say that at ECA, there are many efforts that we are doing to support countries in these areas, including having a vulnerability index, risk and vulnerability index, to help really identify the areas of vulnerabilities and strategies to hedge against them by social protection. And we continue to be committed to help member states in this area. And I think as a part of that commitment and as a part of the interest of member states in this issue, this is exactly the topic that we will be focusing on for next year theme for the Conference of Ministers, and that's what has been proposed. I look forward to hearing today's discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Executive Secretary. I think you also introduced the issue of strengthening social safety nets, creating space and expanding contributory schemes, and also the issue of domestic resource mobilization has come up again. And you made reference to the Takafalu conditional cash transfer scheme that we have in Egypt, which we have heard that Egypt has made some efforts in terms of extension of social protection as a priority through implementing this program. So if I just do the connection from that example of Takafali and go straight to His Excellency Minister of Finance for Egypt, and my question to you would be, could you please, Honorable Minister, share Egypt's experience in financing social protection, including in terms of crisis that we are currently in, and provide some guidance on how countries can increase the fiscal space for social protection through talking of the Takafalu experience. Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm happy to be with you in this important topic of social protection coverage, particularly at this difficult time, which is facing the whole world. As a Minister of Finance, the issue will remain how to balance between a lot of demands and with a limited resources, because always you will find that there are some demands which will come as priorities. Salaries, pension, debt and debt service, and many investments. So we'll always under pressure is how to balance between that and the other demands. However, we believe strongly in that human capital development is essential for any reform, and we will not succeed in any economic reform without, in parallel, a strong and very efficient and sustainable social safety net and social security programs. In case of Egypt, because Egypt started with economic reform in 2016, and it was tough, but it was aimed to create a space for better and more efficient social protection and human capital development, in addition to ensuring that this will be sustained as an economic growth and sustainability to finance all the programs. So let me say at this time, we introduced number one, Takaful and Karama, which is called Solidarity and Dignity Cash Transfer, which one is aiming to most vulnerable families by transferring cash to them, and one for those elderly people who are in need. So also we transfer cash to them. The first one, Takaful, is for families, particularly with women heading these families, and the other one for elderly people, which is called Dignity. Now, this program is covering 4.5 million families. If we assume that multiplied by 3.5 on average, so it covers around 15 million Egyptian people, which we transfer between 350 to 500 Egyptian pounds every year. This is one. In addition to that, we also have in-kind transfer. So we have bread subsidy for around 72 million person out of the total population of Egypt of 103. When people pay on average only 10% of the cost of bread, only 10% they pay, and the government pays the rest. This is on a card, electronic card. So we allow each person to get 5 subsidized bread per day. So we subsidize around 100 billion bread per year, and we allocate something like 50 billion Egyptian pound per year for this subsidized bread. Also, we subsidize food. We subsidize food for around 62 to 63 million family person. We transfer 50 Egyptian pound per year, and on an electronic card. This for families to buy rice, to buy cooking oil, to buy sugar, and other types of food. So this is transfer in kind, in addition to transfer in cash for families. Also, universal health insurance introduced 2.5 years ago when we cover the whole families. We provide them with a full health service package to the whole family. And now Egypt has got 27 governorates. We already covered 2 governorates, and next month we'll go to the 3rd governorate for universal health insurance. This is number 2. Number 3, social housing. When we offer social houses to poor families and those who used to live in very dirty and very difficult places, and we provide this for millions of poor families, and sometimes we give them even with the furniture for free, and they only pay around 300 pounds per month or less, only for maintenance, but we don't ask them for rent or anything. This is number 3. Number 4, and this is also very important, is that we invest hugely in economic growth to create jobs. So Egypt has been investing heavily and was able to create millions of jobs to offer families, particularly those who are in low income, so they can get jobs to get them income. We believe personally this is the most important thing, is to be able to ensure that our economy is growing and able to create jobs for people. This is number 3. Number 4, which is also important, that we increase pension and salaries every year by around 10 to 13%. So last month, we increased pension payments by 13% and also increased salaries by around this percentage, which is equivalent or close to the inflation, the current inflation level in Egypt. Also, we have increased even the tax allowance, the personal tax allowance by 25%, because we believe that social protection, particularly at this difficult time, when we see high inflation going around and the cost of food is going up very high, that we also expand to middle income families to offer them also some sort of protection. So again, we have to ensure that what we do is sustainable, can be financed, and also we have to recognize that at this time, most of our countries, particularly in Africa, are under huge stress to get this high cost of oil, food, and others, also to finance it, particularly at this level of high cost of financing. So our budgets are under huge stress. So we have to strike balance between this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think you started by saying balance between demands and resources. At the same time, you have managed to talk about quite a number of assistance from food, health, housing, and also in terms of in line with the global accelerator, which is around social protection and jobs and economic growth. I think it's a lot for in terms of learning and sharing within the region. That's the story that we get from Egypt, quite practical on what has been done in terms of financing social protection. Next, we move and get the story and what has been done in Guinea-Bissau in terms of financing social protection. So, Your Excellency, the Minister, I still have the same thing. What has been your experience? What is it that you can share and provide guidance on how countries in Africa can increase fiscal space? Over to you, Your Excellency, Jao Fadi.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Directeur, pour nous avoir invités pour être ici. C'est qui me fait un honneur. Donc, par rapport à la question, en fait, la Guinée-Bissau, c'est un pays de faible revenu. Et cette situation est très remarquable au niveau de notre produit intérieur brut. À titre d'exemple, le produit par tête est autour de $727. Ça, c'est le chiffre 2020. Le système sanitaire et protection sociale est très faible. La crise sanitaire encore accentué la vulnérabilité de la population, notamment les plus pauvres et les moins protégés. Le pays dispose d'un taux de pression fiscale très faible, c'est à l'entour de c'est à l'entour de 10% du PIB. Donc, notre espace fiscal est très réduit. Et donc, avec la crise du Covid, notre recette budgétaire a été très bas. Et notre niveau d'endettement aussi est très élevé. C'est presque 78% de PIB. Et nous avons placé dans les risques d'insoutenabilité de croissance. Donc, en dépit de toutes ces difficultés que j'ai remarquées, l'État n'a pas laissé de faire des efforts dans les protections sociales. Nous avons axé notre action en 3 secteurs principaux. Le secteur de la santé, le secteur de l'éducation et l'appui aux familles. Dans le secteur de la santé, nous avons investi un investissement très robuste au niveau de récupération et réhabilitation d'infrastructures hospitalières. Aussi, nous avons rendu les grilles tarifaires des services payés par les usagers qui permettent effectivement aujourd'hui plus d'accessibilité de la population à avoir les services médicaux. Beaucoup de services tels que intervention chirurgicale, médicaments dans l'urgence pour les familles et les usagers qui n'ont pas de ressources, et tous gratuits. Aussi, on a pu faire beaucoup d'investissements dans la lutte contre le Covid. Et je vous dirais une confidence. Maintenant, je suis considéré ministre des Finances et ministre de l'Hôpital. Pas de santé, mais de l'hôpital. Compte tenu de l'effort que l'État fait d'allouer les ressources à l'amélioration des services de l'hôpital principal de la Guinée-Bissau. Dans l'éducation, nous avons rendu les frais scolaires gratuits. Aussi, nous avons investi beaucoup dans les programmes alimentaires qu'on appelle cantines scolaires. Ce qui peut amener de retenir les élèves à l'école, l'accès. Au niveau d'assistance à la population, comme a dit mon collègue d'Égypte, nous, on a pris maintenant des mesures périodiquement de distribuer des appuis en nature à la population. On a fait ça déjà après l'installation de la crise sanitaire 2 fois, en distribuant du riz, du sucre, de l'huile, donc qui permet d'assister les familles les plus pauvres. Aussi, nous avons fixé le prix maximal de certains produits alimentaires, du riz, du sucre, de la farine, et aussi même les combustibles, parce qu'il a un impact sur les prix, donc de transport. Tout cela, l'État a décidé de fixer des prix maximaux pour ces produits. Donc, en défi de tout cela, disons que après la pandémie, maintenant, c'est l'impact du conflit entre la Russie et l'Ukraine qui commence aussi à être visible dans notre pays. Donc, pour me résumer, nous avons effectivement investi beaucoup dans le secteur de la santé, l'éducation et appui aux familles. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister of Finance and Hospitals. I think it's the only title we have which is like that, and also experience in health, education, support family subsidies that did take place. I think a lot to learn amongst the countries. Before I move to the next speaker online, just want to say the Deputy Executive Secretary for ECA is going to leave us for another event. Thank you very much for your speech, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow in the next event. Our next speaker will then go on line to the Deputy Minister of Finance and Budget for Liberia. If I could confirm if she is online.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I am online.
Thank you. Would also be interested to learn the story from Liberia in terms of financing social protection, and also what guidance you can provide to increase the fiscal space for social protection for African countries. You have your floor.
Yeah.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to be here. Unfortunately, I can't be there in person. But
could you please move? Could you move a bit closer to the mic? We are a bit faint.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Hello?
We can hear you now.
Okay. Yes, I said thank you for the opportunity to be here on this platform. For Liberia, this was our second major crisis. The first was the Ebola. So we had learned lessons from the Ebola crisis. So for this crisis, one of the main things, the first thing we did was the president instituted a task force to manage the whole process. And because of what was going on and everybody was confused, the lack of food, the lack of pretty much everything, we introduced free food to the vulnerable population in affected areas, because every part of the country was not affected. So we targeted affected areas where we provided free food, the basic in terms of rice, which is our staple, cooking oil, and other necessities that were needed. We also provided free electricity and water to these communities to ensure that everyone had access to those utilities. One of the things we did too, in terms of the private sector, there were businesses that were challenged. So the government intervened in terms of their debt to make sure that they don't go bankrupt. We also intervene with subsidy to help with surcharge for shipment of goods. Because some shipping industry, some shipping lines were refusing to stop in certain countries because of the COVID. So the government intervened to ensure that goods came into the country to, so that they won't hamper the welfare of the people. In terms of the healthcare system, we don't have a universal healthcare system in Liberia as of now, but services were made available to everyone who needed help at the time. And we are still reaching out to communities to ensure that those who are still feeling the aftermath, I think there are 1 or 2 cases that have flagged up. They are also being accommodated under the system. We were able to review our development plan and have restructured it within the context of COVID, so that to make sure that we don't fall too far behind on our agenda. In terms of the banking system, the central bank introduced electronic payments, because normally people were going to the banks to get checks, and because of the COVID, things were restricted. So we introduced the electronic payments that facilitated easy access to funding, and they helped the citizens to become more viable. And I'm trying to think of what else. Okay, and we use the opportunity also to look at the climate change tracking system and to make interventions in those areas, because with the COVID, things were exacerbated. The rain season, sometimes we get a lot of rain. So we made some interventions to help people in areas that were impacted during that period. I will stop there for now, and anything else I will add to it later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and also bringing in issues on climate change and the review of the development plan, restructuring it within the COVID. I think it's something that can also be shared within the countries. We still have 2 more panelists from the countries, and then we'll then be calling upon the Director for Africa for IMF to now look at all these policies and provide guidance. So we now move to Uganda, and now calling His Excellency Mr. Amos Lugolobi to also share the Uganda story in terms of financing for social protection and increasing the fiscal space. Your Excellency.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. The story for Uganda is not very different, except that we are banking on the fact that 70% of our population is a youthful population below 30 years. And because of that, the issue of human capital development becomes most critical. In that regard, because of the highly increasing population, what we have done first is to implement a new project, which is a big project, of ensuring that we provide free education and we provide universal free health services across the country. But because the population is increasing, we recently, 2 years ago, launched a program known as the Uganda Intergovernmental Fiscal Transfer Program, intended to construct secondary schools across the country per sub-county. A sub-county is a collection of about 5 or 6 parishes. So in each of those, in order to increase access to free secondary education, we have provided an additional secondary school. That is on the side of education. But at the same time, under the same program, we are providing health centers to each of these sub-counties, again, to increase access to free medical services to the population, because we strongly feel that these young people, and perhaps everybody, needs more access to health and educational services. Secondly, the second intervention is the one where we did a diagnostic or a demographic health household survey, and established that the population, 39% of our population are people who only grow crops, and these crops that they grow are mainly food crops for their personal consumption. Uganda is slightly different from other countries with arid conditions, where people have access to land because land belongs to the people. And in that regard, every household can engage in agricultural production given the good climatic conditions that we have. Therefore, the issue of food security is not a big problem. However, where the problem is, 39% of our population cannot produce surplus for the market. In other words, they are not active in the monetary economy. So we have launched a major intervention known as the parish development model, intervening at the parish level, where we have identified those people that are only producing for home consumption, so that on top of producing for home consumption, they have a surplus to sell, participate in the monetary economy. Now, we are doing that across the entire country. We have over 10,000 parishes, and we are doing cash transfers to formations known as circles. Circles are savings and credit organizations where these people jointly work together. So we transfer at least 100 million shillings per parish annually. And they use that money not for immediate consumption, but for investment in areas like the agriculture, to be able to become more productive and therefore be able to sustain themselves. It's not a cash handout for them just to consume, but money that they invest in their various interventions in agriculture, supposedly by experts, extension workers who are available in all parishes in Uganda. So we believe that that should be able to provide more social protection to those people at the grassroots level. Now, when we were attacked by this COVID-19 pandemic, of course, there were major lockdowns. And one of the critical interventions were direct cash transfers. During a lockdown, the key issue was how to feed the population. But remember that our population is largely agricultural based. So the population that we had to feed were the people in urban areas. So we had provided cash transfers to those people in urban areas whose businesses have been locked up during that period of time. It was a transfer through what we call mobile money, using mobile phones. So we can transfer money directly to the vulnerable population. The local leadership helped us to identify all the affected people. They sent to us their telephone contacts, and we transferred money directly to them. But on top of that, we have what we call the social assistance grants for the elderly, known as SEG in short. And this was introduced by the government of Uganda, targeting elderly people beyond 65 years. And it's mainly helping households to retain and build their productive assets and reduce their vulnerability by supplementing their natural coping strategies in the face of shocks. So by December 2021, a total of 304,000 older persons had benefited from this program. But because of the intervention we have had so far in human capital development, the population, our life expectancy, the average life expectancy has increased from 45 years to 68 years. So a number of people now are able to survive. And this has meant that the population that would support has increased. So we had to lift the people that we are supporting under this elderly program from 65 years to 80 years. And so that's how that program has been moving. On the part of women,
Your Excellency, if you could.
we have the Uganda Women Empowerment Program, UWEP, and mainly focusing on improving access to financial services to the Ugandan women. In the case of the youth, we have the Youth Livelihood Program, again, with investments there to support the youth directly. There are a number of programs like the National Security Fund. During COVID, we allowed midterm access to their savings, and that has helped to support their conditions during the crisis. There are a number of other interventions which I cannot complete, but right now I think I should mention that we have a bill in Parliament known as the National Health Insurance Scheme bill. This scheme is intended to finance or provide. It is intended to be financed by a combination of employee and government contributions, and the aim is to cover all the Ugandans when fully implemented. So this is still a bill. It's not yet a law, but something that we hope in the near future will get into play once the law has been fully enacted. I think in the interest of time, I'll keep it at that. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think your point on the lockdown and the business transfers in the urban area leads direct to our next speaker, who is Mr. Eric Manzi from ITUC. And my question from this is, could you elaborate the participation of workers' organizations in identifying options for creating more fiscal space for sustainable financing? And what has been the role of workers' organizations in such discussions? Mr. Manzi, you have your 4 minutes.
Merci. Merci beaucoup, modérateur, pour m'accorder la parole. Premièrement, je remercie les organisateurs pour nous avoir invités. Ceci démontre combien nous, en tant qu'organisation syndicale des travailleurs, sommes concernés par la question, mais aussi notre engagement à œuvrer pour l'extension ou pour une protection sociale universelle en Afrique. La première chose, c'est de dire que partir de 17% de couverture de la protection sociale en Afrique et atteindre 40%, c'est possible. C'est ambitieux, mais c'est possible, si nous nous y mettons tous. Si je considère les interventions aujourd'hui des différents ministres qui ont démontré combien et l'intérêt qu'ils portaient à mettre en place un système de protection sociale sûr pendant une période de crise du Covid-19, mais qui, d'ailleurs, aujourd'hui, se pérennise. Je pense que ça, c'est un engagement très important. Si, au niveau de nos gouvernements, nous acceptons que la protection sociale vient réduire la pauvreté, les inégalités et l'exclusion, si nous reconnaissons que la protection sociale, une protection sociale étendue à tous, peut contribuer à la croissance économique, peut contribuer à réduire la pauvreté et les inégalités. Si nous acceptons que même une protection sociale étendue à tous pourrait contribuer au développement, pourrait contribuer à l'achèvement des objectifs de développement durable. Je crois que si nous nous basons sur cela et que nous révisitons certains engagements qui ont été faits au niveau international, je commencerai par l'appel mondial sur l'action de reprise centrée sur l'humain. Centrée sur l'humain. Je crois que aujourd'hui, nous devons mettre l'aspect humain au centre de toutes nos interventions, et spécialement dans nos interventions sur la protection sociale. Et pour cela, je pense que nous devons changer de rhétorique. Nous ne pouvons pas parler de croissance économique durable et fiable si ceci ne vient pas réduire les inégalités. Si cela ne contribue pas à la répartition ou à la redistribution, je ne dirais pas des richesses, mais au moins des bénéfices de la croissance économique. Si nous ne parlons pas de ça, je pense que nous parlerons de croissance économique pour rien. Si aujourd'hui, nous acceptons que la protection universelle en Afrique pourrait réduire la pauvreté, et si aujourd'hui nous pouvons nous axer sur le fait qu'aujourd'hui, et comme l'a dit mon prédécesseur, le ministre de l'Ouganda, qu'une bonne partie de la population en Afrique travaille en milieu rural et font partie du secteur dit informel, où ces travailleurs n'ont pas suffisamment de protection et, comme vous le savez, n'ont pas toujours accès à tous les bénéfices que met en place nos sociétés. Et pour cela, quelle est la voie à suivre? Je vais finir par là. Ça sera de revoir un peu les mécanismes de financement. Et là, comme organisation syndicale, nous travaillons dans le sens de dire que étendre la protection sociale doit passer par une solidarité entre tous les acteurs et mettre en place des financements innovatifs. Je pense qu'on les a cités, certains ici, passant par la réaffectation des dépenses publiques, en réduisant certaines dépenses, par exemple les dépenses pour, malheureusement pour les dépenses pour les guerres armées, la lutte contre le terrorisme, etc. C'est des choses que nous pouvons éviter. Et nous pouvons aussi revoir un peu des mécanismes innovants sur la taxation, sur la réduction des flux illicites et enfin, pour l'intérêt du temps, être sûr que nous avons un environnement macroéconomique qui est accommodant à l'extension de la protection sociale. Je pense que je pourrais m'arrêter là et peut-être après nous pourrons continuer la discussion. Merci beaucoup, modérateur. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manzi. And I think you're insisting that 40%, yes, it is achievable through with the funding that is available, but reprioritizing the funding. We have heard all the examples from countries, the stories from countries, and also from the trade union perspective. Now I would like to invite Mr. Abebe Selassie, the Director, Africa Department, IMF, to highlight the role of IMF in responding to this crisis through the perspective of social protection. My question to you, Mr. Abebe, is based on IMF's experience with African countries, and in particular in promoting financial stability. Could you please share main options for creating fiscal space for social protection in light of growing concerns over fiscal austerity. Related to that, what role can IMF provide African member states? One, towards an environment that is conducive to increasing fiscal space at the domestic level. Two, on the options the ministers have deliberated on. And then secondly, considering the current Ukraine crisis and consequences that it has on the world economy. Over to you, Mr. Abebe. Okay, I understand he is offline, he is reconnecting. I also note that there are some questions on the Q&A. While waiting for him to reconnect, I think we can take 2 or 3 questions and then we take it from there. We have limited time, so please just be straight to the point. If you can assist in getting the mic to the gentleman at the back.
Yeah, my name is Brian Ngugi from the Nation Media Group in Nairobi, Kenya. My question goes to the Egyptian Finance Minister, Mr. Mohamed Maid. I would like to know how much of a financial burden were your relief measures, and do you see fiscal space in sustaining the measures? Because as we have heard, they've been hailed as among the best in the region. So how much of a financial burden were they? Did you have to reallocate spending from critical programs, or did you have to take up a program, say, with the IMF? Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Not seeing another question. Honorable Minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I have to mention that Egypt has made an economic reform in 2016, which part of it was to remove energy subsidy. Removing the energy subsidy, which was around 25% of our expenditure, allowed a space in our budget to redirect the savings we've made between reducing budget deficit and redistributing this for pension, for cash transfer, for increasing expenditure on health, on food subsidy, and also on providing loans at a very low cost to people to get social housing, and also to offer social housing for free for others. Now, this part of the budget is moving between 18 to 20% of our budget annually. So the only pressure which I am working on is to reduce the burden of debt service, which unfortunately with what is going on now is putting more pressure. But once this pressure is reduced, we will allocate more money towards the expansion and rolling out of the universal health insurance, to continuation of offering more social housing for free and at a low cost, and also for ensuring that more and more cash transfer to more families. I think this, if I take this as a percentage of our GDP, let me say it's around 4 to 5% of annual GDP is allocated to that. And let me say that we are trying to ensure that whatever we do, we keep discipline for our fiscal policies to ensure that our budget deficit was on the declining, and also our debt to GDP is on declining. I have to say that 5 years ago, our debt to GDP was 108%. Our expectations this year to finish next month was 85%. Also, our debt service used to be around 10% of GDP. Now we are talking about 8% and also on a decline mode. This is how it is going, as to keep the physical balance and discipline, and at the same time, when you have more and more space, to redirect it to create jobs and more efficient social protection and protection programs and net safety, social net safety program increase. Answer.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And we have also checked online, that is mainly comments and not questions. With the failure to reconnect from IMF, and without further questions, I think we'll try to close to just check amongst my panelists from the stories that you have heard from the others, if there is anything you might want to add in a minute or so. But we'll take one final question from the gentleman over there, and then we work towards closing the session.
Merci bien pour la parole, hein, et surtout l'ensemble des présentations que nous avons suivies. C'était de très belles expériences par rapport aux différents pays. Mais ce que nous n'avons pas bien entendu, c'est quel est le cadre légal et réglementaire qui encadre l'ensemble des activités qu'ils ont déroulées. Parce qu'on a l'impression que les activités qui ont été déroulées prennent en compte en fait l'espace conjoncturel. C'est dû soit au Covid, ainsi de suite. Mais il faut véritablement qu'on puisse nous expliquer comment tout cela est encadré. Je parle au nom du Burkina Faso. À ce niveau, nous avions, pour le cadre légal et réglementaire, une politique nationale de protection sociale. Et le cadre qui encadre ou qui gère cette politique, c'est un secrétariat permanent, voilà, du Conseil national de protection sociale, et qui est présidé par son Excellence le Premier ministre. Alors, cette politique nationale a un déroulement jusqu'au niveau local, donc le niveau régional, qui a aussi une politique régionale de protection sociale, et donc qui suit l'ensemble des activités qui concourent à mettre en place.
30 secondes.
Voilà, donc qui concourent à mettre en place plutôt la politique au niveau national. C'est ce cadre-là qui sera très intéressant et qu'on peut partager avec l'ensemble des pays. Merci bien.
Okay, thank you. Related with sustainability on regulator. One last question.
Merci beaucoup. Thanks a lot, Mr. Moderator. Let me speak in French. And je voudrais, en fait, je représente le Fonds de solidarité africain, African Solidarity Fund. Nous sommes plutôt une institution qui est dédiée à la promotion du développement, au financement du développement et essentiellement à la promotion des investissements. Je voudrais féliciter et remercier les ministres et les autres panélistes qui nous ont édifiés sur l'expérience de leur pays. En tant qu'intervenant dans le financement du développement, nous sommes beaucoup, même si c'est une question importante, nous sommes moins focusés sur la justice sociale comme les syndicalistes, mais beaucoup plus sur l'enjeu socio-économique de la protection sociale. On a entendu pas mal de systèmes qui se fondent sur la gratuité, sur l'aide, et je pense que c'est quelque chose qui dure depuis longtemps. Et où le ministre d'État ougandais en a parlé, pour les populations rurales, on n'a pas d'aide en fait quelque part. Et ils n'ont pas de couverture ni sanitaire, ni chômage, ni maternité, ni vieillesse. Et donc, la question est de voir est-ce qu'aujourd'hui, la protection sociale, les autorités du développement, les ministres des Finances, nos autorités en charge du développement, les ministres des Finances, les ministres du Plan, les ministres du Développement économique, considèrent-elles la protection sociale comme un enjeu de développement ou comme seulement un enjeu de justice sociale? On avait prévu une présentation, mais le temps a été ce qu'il fait. Mais nous avions fait une recherche au niveau du Fonds social africain pour montrer que sans protection sociale suffisante et efficace, il est impossible de construire un développement durable. Et que donc cette question puisse être considérée comme une question de développement, comme une question d'enjeu de développement et pas seulement une question de justice sociale ou de droit. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. My name is Sobata. I'm an event planner by profession, currently a fellow, but I'm a local government employee, Ministry of Local Government. Let me take this opportunity to applaud the initiatives by different countries, and the Egypt story is inspiring. But as I was sitting here as an event planner, my question came on like, what is it that we are doing to ensure that our social protection system is social protection that creates sustainable jobs? Because as I was listening, it was more of the handouts. How do we ensure that it creates more sustainable jobs? For example, we talked of the housing infrastructure. I didn't hear panelists talking about WASH, that is access to water, and sanitation. Because during COVID, we realized that people didn't have access to water and sanitation to continuously wash their hands. Africa has got a problem in terms of slums and overcrowding. So my recommendation would be, when we are looking at the social protection system, can it be a social protection system that creates access to housing, infrastructure, build more houses? When you build more houses, you are creating jobs. When you provide water and sanitation services in terms of infrastructure, you are creating more jobs. So the idea is to have less of handouts that are not sustainable, but doing social protection that creates jobs, investing in infrastructure development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then you have just one last, Mr. Diop. I understand is online. Then I'm told we need to close the session.
Bonsoir.
Is Mr. Diop online?
Bonsoir. On m'entend?
Ahmed Abba, République islamique de Mauritanie. Je demande, merci Monsieur le Président, merci Monsieur le Ministre. Par rapport à l'expérience de l'Égypte, je demande le pourcentage de protection sociale. Vous parlez seulement, est-ce que c'est les distributions, les transferts cash, les 15 à 18%, est-ce que ça concerne seulement les transferts cash que vous transférez au profit des populations vulnérables, ou bien est-ce que ce pourcentage inclut les dépenses de l'éducation, la santé et la protection sociale? Est-ce que le pourcentage ça concerne toutes ces dépenses? Merci.
Okay, thank you. We are now coming to the. Okay, I see Mr. Jeff is now online. Mr. Jeff, you have a minute for a question.
Merci beaucoup. Bonsoir à tout le monde.
You are muted, Mr. Jeff.
Merci beaucoup. C'est M. Serine Diouf. Je suis le directeur des opérations de l'Agence nationale.
No, the technology is not working.
You hear me? Hello?
Okay, we can't hear you, Mr. Job. So
we'll send you back to work with the IT colleagues. In the meantime, as we move towards closure, would you have the IMF come in, and then I'm going to give each one of the panelists a minute for the final statements. Can I check if the director IMF is online? IMF director? Okay. What we're going to do is I'll go through the panelists to just give each one 1 minute to summarize based on the questions that were directed to them in the discussion. So I'll stand from the back and start with Eric, and we'll go this way.
Merci. Mais pour conclure, je pense que d'abord, mettons-nous d'accord sur un point. Les mesures qui ont été mises en place ou qui sont en train d'être mises en place dans l'urgence sur la protection sociale doivent être institutionnalisées. On ne doit pas attendre d'entrer dans la crise pour pouvoir mettre en place. On continue sur ce chemin. La deuxième chose, cela se fait dans un cadre de dialogue. Et c'est là que nous jouons notre rôle en tant qu'organisation syndicale. Nous dialoguons avec le gouvernement, les employeurs pour pouvoir institutionnaliser. Le dernier point, c'est de se dire le travail d'extension de la protection sociale n'enlève pas toutes les politiques de création d'emplois décents. Je pense que c'est ça le premier point. Voilà, je pense que pour la conclusion, c'est ça que je peux dire. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. I heard from the submission from the participants, it is clear that provision of social protection has to be greatly associated with investment, public investment in terms of human capital development, the provision of social services to ensure that it is sustainable. Because mere cash transfers may not be sustainable unless we achieve substantial economic growth within our economies. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. We need to grow our economies to be able to raise more tax revenues, to reduce the level of dependence in terms of borrowing, so that we are able to continue supporting our population. So effectively, we have to make our population work, produce, and therefore be able to provide more social protection for themselves. So we have provided enabling conditions, necessary support in order to make them more productive, in order to ensure that we have a sustainable way of providing social protection.
Yeah, let me answer the first one of the question about the 2%. The 2% of GDP is only for cash and in-kind transfer. This is the only. But for health, we allocate 6 to 7% of GDP. And education, we always move in the range of 5%. So I just want to clarify. Let me say something very important. What we found when we made the economic reform in 2006 was negatively impacting the poor. And as a result of the economic reform, the poverty level increased from around 27% to around 62%. We had to interfere. Let me say that we interfered with many, many programs. But now let me talk about one of the most important programs Egypt now is started to achieve. The program is called, let me say that this program, it's in a wider definition, is to reduce poverty and to address multidimensional poverty. It's not only giving food or giving money, it is health, it is education, it is clean water, it is utilities, it is services. This presidential initiative called Decent Life, in Arabic called Hayat Karima, is a case in point. It is a national project for rural Egypt development. It's a mega project with a total spending of $50 billion over a period of 3 to 4 years. It will cover to develop rural villages through various interventions. Most of the interventions focus on education, health, infrastructure investment, with a cross-cutting focus on employability and economic empowerment to ensure a comprehensive investment in human capital and elevating the targeted population standards of living. This Haya Karima or Decent Life targets around 4,584 villages, with an estimated total target beneficiaries reaching more than 60 million people living in the poorest areas. The government is also expanding its cash transfer program coverage with also in-kind coverage. So this program is now, we are concentrating, the first year has ended, we are starting the second year. It is a $50 billion over a period of 3 to 4 years, and it will cover around 60 million, which is around 60% of Egypt population, to improve the living standards. Thank you.
Merci. En ce qui nous concerne très rapidement, je peux dire que la question de solidarité dans mon pays, le gouvernement a toujours un poste de ministre pour la solidarité sociale et la famille. Donc, il se préoccupe beaucoup avec la question sociale. Et on dire aussi que le gouvernement est toujours attentif au prix des biens de première nécessité pour les familles, pour éviter que les plus pauvres n'aient pas accès à l'achat des denrées alimentaires. Nous pensons aussi pour le futur, pour pérenniser toutes les mesures, la création de conditions qui facilitent le financement des petites et moyennes entreprises va permettre de créer des emplois et ainsi formaliser les entreprises qui peuvent jouer un rôle très important dans le financement de la sécurité sociale. Donc, aussi diversifier la production agricole, l'État investisse beaucoup dans ces domaines et surtout les familles pour qu'ils atteignent les niveaux de production qui assurent l'autonomie et puissent combattre la famine. Donc, très rapidement, Monsieur le Directeur, voilà quelques pistes que nous avons identifiées qui permettent effectivement de s'en sortir et pérenniser les ressources pour la sécurité sociale, financière et sécurité sociale. Merci.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for agreeing to share their very interesting stories, their time and their expertise. And I think there's a lot to learn, and as part of the South-South knowledge sharing, it's interesting that we can share all this amongst ourselves as countries from the region and learn from each other. And also to the organizers of this 54th CoM for having this session with us. It's been a pleasure to host the event with such honorable guests. And to conclude the session, I would like to give a minute each to Ms. Christina and Ms. Cynthia, if they are still online, and that will be the last part of our session. Let me start with Ms. Christina. Are you still online with us?
No, she has left.
Okay, doesn't seem like. Ms. Cynthia, the ILO Deputy Assistant Director General.
Thank you very much, Alexio. I hope you can hear me clearly.
You're a bit faint. Could you come closer to the mic? Sorry.
Okay, I'm as close to the mic as possible. Can you hear me clearly now?
A bit better.
Okay. Let me use the 2 minutes on the behalf of my sister and myself and start by thanking the honorable ministers and the panelists for this excellent discussion that has taken place, very fruitful, very rich, and we've received quite a lot of innovative experiences of what ministers of finance are doing in the area of social protection. Let me especially thank the Minister of Finance from Egypt, We've called upon the minister a couple of times and he has always been there. We really appreciate your availability. We appreciate the work you're doing and how you're championing the issue of social protection in Egypt. And this applies to all the other ministers who shared their story with us. A couple of quick comments. One is that social protection is not an expense. It is an investment. It is an investment that we have to make to have the kind of inclusive development that we desire in Africa and to create the kind of wealth that is required for Africa to move from where it is to where it wants to be. So that's the first one. The second one is building social protection systems is not a choice. It is something that has to be done. And we have shown through the experiences that have been shared that it is being done. And there are a lot of innovative practices in the Africa region that we will definitely work with you to share within the context of South-South collaboration. We need to address the funding gap. And excellent ideas have come from USG Duarte, from the ECA, including addressing the issues of illicit financial flows, including the issue of debt forgiveness and domestic resources, and also addressing the issues of waste and creating more efficient systems. The ministries of finance have a critical role to play in creating that physical space. And I'm really very impressed with the way the ministers have shown ownership in promoting social protection from their remit and seeing the benefits that this has for their countries. As was said by Eric Manzi, it is achievable for us to reach 40% by 2025. We have shown in what is happening in our countries that some of this is already being done. What we need to do is to leverage. We need to take it to the next level. We need to own it as ministers of finance and ensure that we have the whole of government working with other ministries, including the ministries of labor, other ministries responsible for social protection. But beyond that, getting the social partners, business, the trade unions, and all other critical stakeholders in an all of society engagement. Last but not the least point, austerity measures will be detrimental to a human-centered recovery. As attractive as it may be, as tempting as it may be, reverting to fiscal consolidation to pay for the massive public expenditure outlays necessitated by COVID must be avoided. Previous crises have shown that austerity measures leave deep social scarring, hurting the most vulnerable in society. On the reverse, striving for jobs-rich, human-centered recovery aligned with health, social, environmental, and climate change goals will contribute to income security, job creation, and social cohesion objectives, and thereby expand the tax base and help finance universal social protection. Last but not the least, the ministers of finance present in this conversation and your counterparts that are not here, but that we know are doing great work, will be key advocates, key champions that we'll be working with to ensure that we realize the very, very important objective of reaching 40% social protection coverage in Africa by the year 2025. And I want to thank everyone, including all those who contributed through the virtual space with their comments, with their questions. Thank you very much. I yield to you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. Thank you very much for those remarks. And with your comment online, I'll now give the very final words to the Deputy Minister for Liberia, representing those online. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam, for your statement. And I think one of the things that we need to focus on also, I think our responses have been more impromptu or like a knee-jerk reaction. But I think even though there are financing options available, what we need to do to attract support and ensure the effectiveness of these programs, we need to develop well-designed, broad-based, integrated, and costed national policies and strategies that includes job creation, climate and gender-sensitive actions, and universal social protection systems, including social protection floors, along with the required technical assistance for an effective M&E system. If we don't do this, we'll always keep having these knee-jerk reactions. So I think we need to solidify it even better by having these concrete actions that needs to be taken. Thank you again, and I hope that we can see some improvement in the next year.
Thank you very much. A big thank you to each and everyone present in the room and online. And I think we have been talking here, not the theoretical side, but the actual practical cases that are happening on the country. And let's keep working on this from a human-centered approach. This is the end of our side event, and a good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you.
We will invite you for Mr. Moderator. That was very good.